NASA has been sending satellites to Mars to photograph the surface of the red planet. But what if those photographs found proof of a lost civilization there? A civilization some believe may have also colonized Earth. For decades, we've been sending probes to Mars, and ever since, strange images have been captured on the surface of the red planet. Could this be a floating spoon? Or this, a statue? What about this? The face of a god? But then, in the spring of 2020, things got really strange when an amateur astronomer claimed the cameras on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter photographed this. Take a closer look. It appears to be a group of buildings and pyramids on Mars, one even in the shape of an eagle's head. George Haas is the director of the Esoteric Cydonia Institute. He believes this could be evidence of an ancient civilization on Mars.
The first structure to get my attention is this four-sided pyramid that has a conjoined mound at the top. These are large geoglyphic formations that show intelligent design. All kinds of formations that appears to be a city.
George also believes these Martian pyramids are eerily similar to the ancient Mayan pyramids in Mexico.
It looks a lot like the Pyramid of the Moon in Teotihuacan. You have a four-sided pyramid with this platform or porch that's jutted off the one end of the pyramid. And they're almost identical.
Forensic investigator Chase Klotsky says there's a case to be made for past life on Mars.
There is physical evidence, scientific evidence, that there was once water on Mars. So if the water was there, it easily could have supported civilization.
So where did the Martians go? One popular theory, they were destroyed by nuclear war. The possible evidence? Atmospheric traces of an element called xenon-129.
Xenon-129 is a signature of artificial nuclear explosions.
A 1 megaton bomb can completely level a radius of nearly 4 miles. But before we mourn the annihilation of Martian civilization, let's determine if there was a civilization at all. We took these photos to the best in the field, Mars mission planner Jonathan Hill. Hill begins by examining the large eagle's head structure. Could that be by design?
We see cliff faces along the edge, nice gentle slopes that are consistent with ice deposits that we see on similar mesas throughout the planet.
Hill says those lines indicate a natural formation, and geological analysis of the area confirms it.
So using ground-penetrating radar from orbit, we can see down into different layers of these mesas to see what they're made out of. And the entire mesa is rock and water ice, and so that obviously rules out any artificial metals or other materials.
But what about the nearby pyramid? George Haas claims it's a mirror image of the Pyramid of the Moon in Mexico. Were the two built by the same hands?
When you look at it, the difference between an actual pyramid is that all the angles are perfect. They were artificially engineered. When you look at a mesa like this, the edges aren't straight, they're all curves. The top is not centered. The geometry is just not there.
And that evidence of nuclear war on Mars? The xenon-129?
Xenon is a naturally occurring gas. We find traces of it in our atmosphere here on Earth, so it's not surprising that we find traces of it on Mars.
After years of studying the red planet and claims of amazing structures there, Hill believes there's a psychological explanation for what people think they are seeing on Mars, the phenomenon known as pareidolia.
It's basically where the human brain goes a little too far, and it implants patterns where patterns don't exist. And so I think people have to really prove to themselves that they're not being affected by this known effect.
So it's simply a trick of the eye. And turns out that sometimes we'll see things we want to see and not what's actually there. So our verdict? Pareidolia. But don't let that stop you from looking up at the stars for that alien life. We may still find the proof one day. From 1969 to 1972, NASA's 6 Apollo moon landings defined a golden age in space exploration. The awesome imagery of those missions made history, but some people believe that this image reveals a secret history.
In my opinion, that is not a natural structure. It's got to be some intelligent species that created it.
In the 1960s, Ken Johnston was a NASA test pilot, but later as director of the Data and Photo Control Department at the Johnson Space Flight Center. He says on one of the moon missions, the astronauts came back with intriguing photographs.
I was in kind of shock. And some of the craters would actually show domes and actual bases.
Bases on the moon? Ken's talking about these rounded dome-shaped objects in the middle of one of the craters. But what's even more shocking, Ken says when he asked his boss about the photos, he was told to stop asking.
And we argued a little bit. He finally said, I don't care what you do, just get rid of those pictures that were taken.
Is it a cover-up? One thing is certain, Ken's not the only person to believe there's been alien activity on the moon. Take a look at these photos. Some believe this looks like vehicle tracks. How did these things get there? Journalist Alexis Brooks says some believe they could be the work of an ancient interstellar civilization called the Anunnaki.
Their technology is said to be integral in the structures that we're familiar with today, like the pyramids. So the question becomes, did this ancient race lay footing, if you will, on the moon?
The Anunnaki first appeared in the ancient traditions of the Sumerians and the Babylonians over 3,000 years ago. Do these images suggest they or another civilization landed on the moon? We asked astrophotographer Andrew McCarthy to check it out. McCarthy starts by examining the photo of the alleged bases.
It really does look like something artificial at first glance.
McCarthy focuses not only on the structure, but on the crater around it.
When an impact happens, ejecta is flung everywhere. Some of it is flung straight up and comes straight back down. And it creates these irregular piles in the middle of the crater that you see here. Frankly, if it wasn't there, that would be weird.
Next, Mars mission planner Jonathan Hill takes a look at those strange tracks. Hill points out that boulders often leave similar tracks when they roll across the surface, but these tracks are perfectly parallel.
My first thought was the lunar rovers driven by the Apollo astronauts.
Hill checks images from Apollo landing sites and comes up empty.
The United States was not the only country that sent wheeled vehicles to the moon.
In fact, in 1970, the Soviet Lunokhod-1 was the first remote-controlled rover to land on an extraterrestrial body, and the width of its known tracks seemed to match the mystery photo.
They look very, very similar to those two parallel line tracks we saw before. But we still can't quite prove definitively that that's what caused these particular set of double tracks.
Well, we don't have proof that the Anunnaki ever made it to the moon. But we do know those moon bases aren't alien-made, while the mysterious tracks look like human handiwork. So our verdict? The bases are natural formations, and the tracks likely from a lunar rover. And here's hoping we get back to the moon soon to make some more. The year is 1964. It's a beautiful spring day in Cumbria, England. Fireman Jim Templeton has the day off and takes his family to a local park near an inlet called the Solway Firth. 5-year-old Elizabeth gathers a bouquet of wildflowers while her father, an amateur photographer, snaps a few photos of the adorable tot on his new Kodak camera. But one shows something no one can explain. Someone dressed in what appears to be a spacesuit can be seen just behind the young girl's head. Take a closer look at that white outfit in what looks like a helmet with a face shield. Sure, it looks like this guy could be planting a flag on the moon. But Jim swears there was no one else behind his daughter when he took the photo, and certainly no astronauts from this planet or any other. The image spreads quickly to newspapers around the world, as does speculation on what this mysterious figure could be. Importantly, the photo is from the early years of the space age, with both the Soviets and the American programs making regular headlines. So the spaceman theory quickly gained traction. On the flip side, the escalating nuclear arms race fuels wild speculation that the figure was wearing a radiation hazmat suit. Coincidentally, there was a Royal Air Force base used to develop nuclear missiles near the Solway Firth. Some speculated this figure could have actually been a Soviet spy. Intrigue involving nuclear weapons sounds like a stretch, but remember, Cold War hysteria was still riding high just after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So what's really in this photograph? A visitor from space, a Soviet nuclear spy, or is it just a decades-old hoax? Let's see what develops when we consult our experts. First, we determined if the appearance of the figure was the result of some camera development trickery.
To do some trick photography in the 60s, some would do a double exposure where you're taking two images onto the same slide of negative. Now, that's not possible to create a scene like this, however, because you would see some kind of ghosting artifacts of this young girl. Especially since her wind is blowing in her hair, it'd be impossible to duplicate that same moment twice for both exposures.
So it seems as though there really was someone or something in the background.
If this was a person with a helmet on, then this arm is actually kind of pointing the wrong way. It's not an arm that's kind of coming out and forwards. It really looks like this is viewed from behind. Now, if I was to obscure the head of the person, it looks way more natural as something being viewed from behind.
And perhaps what everyone thinks is a helmet is, in fact, something else.
That would mean that this dark area here isn't actually a faceplate. It's just the hair of the person. So this is a hat, this is the hair. So I think what we're seeing here is a figure, and they're facing away from the camera.
Based on the figure's anatomy, clothing, and setting, West's best guess is that this is a woman in a hat.
We do have another photograph of the scene. What we see here is the mother. Now, the mother is wearing a bluish-looking dress. We see the top here in this region. It's almost white in this photograph.
The theory is that the blue dress and her hat looks white here due to overexposure. But if it was the girl's mother, why didn't the family notice at the time?
And when the pictures get developed, they look at them days or weeks later, they just simply don't remember that that person happened to be standing in that position. No one has a perfect recording of exactly where everybody was stood on a particular moment, like 3 days ago or a week ago.
Based on Mick West's analysis of the clothing, we're going to agree and say it's a woman in a hat.
At an altitude of about 12 kilometers from the surface of Mars.
March 2021.
Heat shield set. Skycrane maneuver has started, about 20 meters off the surface.
Tango Delta.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars.
After a dramatic landing on Mars, NASA's Perseverance rover is looking for signs of ancient life, either primitive forms of bacteria or strands of DNA. To get its bearings, it takes a panorama of 4 images, and in the 3rd frame, it snaps this. A bizarre object appears suspended over the Martian surface. Zoom in, and it's clearly something thin and elongated, seemingly out of place. Just minutes after NASA downloads the image, social media lights up with posts about aliens and UFOs.
Zooming into the image, you can see its shape really closely resembles a bird in flight.
Let's not just take McCarthy's word for it. Here's a bird in flight on Earth. We pixelate it to the same degree as the Perseverance image, and we put it slightly out of focus. Practically a match, right? Percival Lowell, America's preeminent astronomer of the early 1900s, studied Mars with a telescope for 15 years. Lowell saw lines on the surface and grew convinced that they were irrigation canals to transport water from melting polar ice. He took this as evidence of intelligent life on the Red Planet. In the 1960s, the Mariner missions captured detailed images of the surface, and it turned out that Lowell's canals were actually a string of craters. But at least part of Lowell's theory has been proven true. In 2008, NASA's Phoenix Mars lander discovered ice under the Martian surface. So the possibility of life on Mars isn't out of the question. The Perseverance rover is the largest astrobiology expedition ever launched by NASA. Did it find proof of Martian life within weeks of touchdown? Let's check in with NASA geologist Bob Anderson. First, is this all a hoax?
You can tell that this is a real Martian image because the sky is not blue, it's yellow, which is exactly what you would see on the surface of Mars.
Dust particles in the Martian atmosphere are high in iron oxide, which absorbs blue light and creates a yellow sky. So what about an aircraft? Believe it or not, a helicopter named Ingenuity hitched a ride with Perseverance. It has successfully flown on Mars at least 11 times. So could Ingenuity be what's in the picture?
You see the shape of it. It's a very distinct box with 4 legs from it, with the propellers that are turning. And you don't see any of those features in this object here.
Okay, so it's not Ingenuity, but Anderson does see a familiar shape in the picture.
If you take a look at this object in real close, it's more of an elliptical shape, and so it's very indicative of dust particles that we've been studying on Mars with the microscope.
Winds on Mars can kick up dust storms so big we can see them on Earth, and the dust's red hue gives the planet its color. But Mars dust is electrostatic, which means it clings to everything it touches. So it likely would stick to the camera's sensor or lenses and appear on all 4 images, not just one. So Anderson has another theory.
It actually could be a foreign object from the rover itself. The rover has little blankets and things covered with gold foil to protect it from temperature, and sometimes in the wind and in the sand, those little pieces get worn off.
So, what we might be seeing is a flyaway piece of insulation or coating. It likely blew off just before the picture was taken, flew out a few feet, then dropped before the next frame. So, our verdict? We're going with Bob Anderson. It's not 100% clear, but the bird was likely a flyaway piece of the Perseverance. In 2026, SpaceX hopes to land humans on the red planet. So then we'll definitely be able to say, there is life on Mars. From 2006 to 2022, David Toon, a retired Army aviation officer, has been conducting imagery analysis on NASA-archived solar satellite photos. He's reviewed over 5 million and has singled out more than 50,000 that he thinks show suspicious events or objects. Look closer. Set against the soft plumes of energy are hard-edged objects in various colors, shapes, and sizes, all hovering in close proximity to the sun. David believes these are examples of technosignatures, which are defined as signs of intelligent life beyond our Earth.
The images indicate there is a more organized pattern to these objects. The lines, the shapes are all basic evidence that there's intelligence behind it. It's not just a natural phenomenon.
Investigative journalist MJ Banaya says there are many who support the theory of a solar-based civilization. In fact, in 2016, scientific journal Acta Astronautica published researcher Clement Vidal's groundbreaking abstract entitled Stellivore Extraterrestrials, Binary Stars as Living Systems.
Clement Vidal speculates that life could evolve to use solar energy to fuel itself. He refers to these creatures as stellivores.
These theoretical star eaters would actively feed on stars like the sun.
Much like we consume organic material to fuel our bodies, there could possibly be alien life out there that uses solar energy to fuel itself.
Today, as the SETI Institute continues the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, it is giving credence to the stellivore theory as it decides which stars to look at next. But could these hypothetical beings really be actively feeding on our sun? Let's see if our experts can shed any light on the subject. First, physicist Matthew Shadagis immediately takes a bite out of the stellivore theory.
The reason why I don't think this is applicable to our current situation is that in the stellivore model, that is an explanation for certain binary star systems.
A binary star system occurs when 2 stars orbit a shared center of mass, making them gravitationally bound to one another. Shadagis explains that Vidal actually envisions stellivores as one half of this kind of system.
One of the members of a binary star system is an actual star, whereas the other apparent star is actually some sort of advanced construction or artificial structure that is taking energy out of the star.
Of course, our solar system doesn't have 2 suns.
Since our solar system is not a binary system, this is not really an applicable hypothesis to the current situation.
Then could it be another kind of alien structure? Perhaps the beginnings of a Dyson sphere? This megastructure, dreamed up by theoretical physicist Freeman Dyson, would surround stars and harvest their power for its alien engineers. But again, Shidakis doesn't see it because he doesn't see solid structures in these shapes at all.
We could be looking at natural gases, plasma, or other things coming out of the sun together with a camera artifact that makes that chunk of gas look more geometric than it actually is.
And astrophotography expert Andrew McCarthy agrees, noting that while NASA only employs state-of-the-art cameras, those cameras do have their limitations.
I think the most likely culprit is simply a camera artifact. The goal behind this CCD technology used by NASA is to just preserve the data it's collecting. But it has a side effect. As these specific camera pixels fill up, they tend to bleed into the surrounding areas. Sometimes that creates unusual shapes in the photos. It's not a sign of any kind of object floating out there near the sun. It's just a sign of how the technology actually works.
But Shidakis says the sun continues to spark intrigue.
Recently, we had an example in the news of a coronal mass ejection. Headlines around the world read things like, "Piece of the sun breaks off and forms a vortex and scientists are baffled." And this just underscores how there are natural phenomena that the sun produces that can still baffle us. That doesn't mean they're paranormal or extraterrestrial.
Our verdict? These are unexplained solar images. While we agree with McCarthy that some of these images may be easily explained by camera artifacts, we can't prove it for all of them. We also can't say for certain if this is or is not a natural solar phenomenon. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence has now gone on for more than 60 years with no luck. But nobody's giving up. After all, there are still hundreds of billions of stars to investigate. It's May 2000 on Mars. NASA's Mars Global Surveyor probe is sending back photos from its mission to study and map the whole surface of the red planet. But as researchers are going through the pictures, one image is nothing like anyone could have expected. In the right corner of the black and white photo are what appear to be several long tube-like objects embedded in the sand or rock. Let's take a closer look. They feature a series of parallel ridges, almost like a massive corrugated pipe. Former aerospace engineer Mike Barra, who has been studying Mars for more than 2 decades, thinks this anomaly merits further attention.
As a structural engineer, what I saw was what looked like a series of repeating, supporting structural objects that don't look entirely natural.
Mike thinks it might be proof of the existence of some sort of past Martian civilization.
It could have been some sort of hydraulic tube. It could be a way of moving water around the very barren Martian surface, or it could have even been a transport tube. And when you look at this as a glass tube, you see that there's like a compartment there, almost like a little train that got stuck in this corner and couldn't make the turn, and now it's sort of encased there forever.
Corrugated pipes can twist and turn. So author Jason Martell says some suggest this could have been an ancient aqueduct that used gravity to divert water.
NASA recently amazed the UFO community with the announcement that there's evidence for a contemporary liquid water movement on the Martian surface.
NASA says it seems some dark streaks on Mars are actually running water flowing downhill. Still, others claim these formations aren't pipes, but an entirely different sort of structure.
Could these have been some type of a transport tube, also known as pneumatic tubes? Pressure is used to move objects through a network of tubes, possibly from some type of sentient alien that had otherworldly machine parts, which now lay embedded in the red planet's dirt.
NASA has been monitoring Mars since the 1960s, yet thus far, they haven't been able to detect any indisputable signs of life. Are their cameras missing the big picture? Or is the idea of life on Mars better suited for comic books? Let's get a better read from our experts. To kick us off, could these be broken and ancient pneumatic tubes from an alien transport system? NASA geologist Dr. Bob Anderson doubts it. He says this design would be needlessly complex.
If you look at modern transport systems on Earth today, hypertrains and stuff, you don't find these kind of junctions here. Why don't you just run it directly from A to B?
To be fair, if these are ancient tubes, we may only be seeing fragments of them. But why haven't they been seen elsewhere on Mars? This likely also rules out them being something like an aqueduct system.
If this was created by an alien technology, I would expect to find something that dug the hole up, any kind of a pumping system to get the water to go anywhere. But there's no parts laid anywhere that can be seen in the image. And also, it's located in an area where you're not near the polar caps where most of the water is on Mars. Therefore, it doesn't even seem to be in an ideal location.
Yet, astrophotographer Andrew McCarthy believes that water does have something to do with the solution.
I think what we're looking at here is an ancient riverbed, either formed from flowing water or flowing lava that carved out this shape in the Martian terrain. Meanwhile, these lines were formed by sand being brought in by the Martian atmosphere, depositing it, much like sand dunes here on Earth.
And Anderson confirms this is not the only place where we see this on the red planet.
We do know that about maybe 3 billion years ago, Mars had a very valid hydrologic cycle. We had an ocean, we had streams. But since Mars has dried up about 2 billion years ago, what happens is that these channels or these cracks are left behind. And because of the depression there, the winds are flowing down those channels, forming these beautiful lines. So we've seen this all over the surface of Mars.
We have more than scratched the surface on this one. And although ancient aqueducts do sound interesting, we're going to flow in a different direction with our verdict and say that these are wind-blown ripples in sand dunes. Well, who knows? In another 2 billion years, advanced plumbing systems may end up on Mars. February 9th, 2021, southern Florida. Stuart Eck is on the road when a flash of light makes him pull over. It's not the police, it's this.
Oh my goodness. Awesome, it's sunrise.
A large white plume unfurls across the sky, growing larger and larger. He's not frightened, but he is amazed.
You see the shockwave go out? Oh, wow, awesome!
I looked over and it was a giant flame in the sky.
Take another look. As the light passes over Stuart, it leaves behind a massive trail.
It ballooned out like it was exploding or something very different was going on. And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life.
Not everyone Stuart talked to was as smitten with the object.
Unbelievable.
It scared a lot of people to death, thinking it was some type of weapon coming in from outer space.
Florida is a UFO hotspot. It's actually second only to California. There have been 7,000 sightings of UFOs in Florida since 1998.
But UFOs are consistently reported to fly without leaving visible exhaust or contrails. And there's another theory, a very human, high-tech weapon reported to leave a distinctive exhaust trail. The Chinese military already claims to have developed something called a hypersonic missile. As the name suggests, it travels at 5 times the speed of sound at low altitude. That's a game changer because such a weapon could make it from the human missile silos in central China to Washington, D.C., evading radar and existing air defense systems until it is already well over U.S. airspace. And American nuclear submarines reportedly now have their own hypersonic missile, dubbed the Sea Dragon. So that might be what Stuart witnessed. Another theory? This is some new rocket being developed by a space entrepreneur like Elon Musk. Notice how both this 2017 SpaceX launch and the one in Stuart's video have glowing contrails due to an effect you may have seen in an earlier episode about a suspected Chinese rocket. While it's dark on the ground, the rocket and its contrails are high up enough to be illuminated by the sun, even though it's over the horizon. But exactly what sort of rocket, missile, or other craft could be creating the huge exhaust trail in Stuart's video is a mystery. SpaceX's Falcon 9 has become the most flown operational U.S. rocket, reaching orbit 24 times in 2020. So could this be another Elon Musk venture, or is there something else more troubling going on? First, astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio considers if this could be a jet going supersonic.
When the jet approaches the sound barrier, you'll see a condensation front along the front of the jet.
In moist air, a speeding plane creates low-pressure areas where water condenses in a vapor cone. As the plane speeds up, the cloud moves down the body. And when the plane breaks through the sound barrier, it outraces the water droplets and the cone disappears.
What we're seeing here, though, is a continuous plume that's persistent. So this is definitely not a supersonic jet.
Our aviation expert, Tim McMillan, thinks he can narrow it down further.
That teardrop shape and that contrail there, that is characteristic of some type of rocket or potentially a missile test.
But when McMillan checks the SpaceX launch schedule, he rules out any Elon Musk-related UFOs. So could this be a new weapons system, like the Sea Dragon?
The U.S. is just now kind of getting into the hypersonics game and trying to develop more operational hypersonic platforms.
When D'Antonio digs deeper, he finds the U.S. military had tested submarine-launched missiles in the area that day. But the military won't say what exactly was launched.
If it was a missile test of some kind, it's probably a missile that they don't want you to know about.
Despite the strange appearance, we're calling this one a rocket or missile launch. But what rocket or missile, we may never know. What's clear is that the U.S. is in a race to develop unstoppable hypersonic missiles. So we may be witnessing one of the very first tests. February 2022, Alta, Norway. It's a clear afternoon in this quiet town 240 miles north of the Arctic Circle. A man is sitting in his car when he spots something unusual moving on the horizon and decides to record it. A bright white object is streaking across the sky. But take a closer look. It appears to be circular on one end with a small pointed tail on the other. Then, just a few miles away, a car dash cam also captures the strange white anomaly. While some may believe this is a UFO, according to journalist MJ Banias, this sighting has the hallmarks of an unusual 50-year-old event known as the Great Daylight Fireball.
In August of 1972, people reported seeing a very large, bright fireball in the sky. Many speculated that it was some sort of comet or meteorite or perhaps a piece of space debris that entered Earth's atmosphere.
But Banias also notes a key difference.
The fireball in the Utah incident left a long contrail. The tail of whatever this object is quite short. It doesn't leave a line of smoke behind it.
And that clue has led observers to another theory.
Norway is home to the Andøya Test Center, which is used by multiple countries to launch and test various new weapons and missiles that are in development.
But some fear it's a test from a far more hostile actor.
The Russians have made the claim that they actually used a hypersonic missile to take out a Ukrainian arms depot in March 2022. But there's no verifiable intelligence that confirms it.
Hypersonic missiles are a breakthrough technology that travel very fast and very low, making them nearly impossible to detect until they're about to hit their targets. Might the Russians have been testing one nearby? Now, supersonic means faster than the speed of sound, which is 761 miles per hour at sea level. But hypersonic? That is 5 times faster, over 3,800 miles per hour. What could be traveling that fast? Are we seeing leftovers from the formation of our solar system? Or possibly the latest game-changing military technology? Let's see what our experts have to say. We begin with video forensic analyst Michael Primo. Is this video even legit?
When authenticating evidence, the most reliable approach is to collect a known sample from the device and perform what's called a CRP test to make determinations about whether or not that particular video came from that particular device. I requested a reference sample be provided from the operator, and we were able to verify that the video can be considered authentic.
If it's real, then what could it be?
I think we're not looking at any kind of aircraft, whether it be commercial or any type of passenger aircraft, or drone or military, just traveling too fast. But also, there's obviously no discernible features. There's no wings, there's no tail section.
So if it's not a terrestrial craft, is it from space?
If, let's say, there was a satellite re-entering the Earth's atmosphere because it was defunct and no longer operational, you might see a breakup.
Today, there are about 5,000 satellites orbiting the Earth, and it's estimated about 300 objects in orbit fall back to Earth and burn up each year. But D'Antonio doesn't see one telltale sign in the video.
There's so many appendages, solar panels, satellite would be basically leaving parts behind through the entire process of re-entry. You would see a long trail of debris as it was re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
But satellites aren't the only things that fall to Earth. Could we be seeing an event like the Great Daylight Fireball of 1972?
It's a very flat trajectory that, to me, is consistent with a hypersonic missile. In particular, the speed, the fact that it is moving within the Earth's atmosphere, it is traveling in a straight line, all consistent with a hypersonic missile.
There are two main types of hypersonic missiles. Hypersonic cruise missiles, which are boosted by a rocket to hypersonic speed, and then use an air-breathing engine called a scramjet to sustain that speed. And hypersonic gliding vehicles, which are launched from a rocket, but then glide into their target. If that's what this is, it's a rare video of a new and deadly weapon.
Another clue is towards the end of the video when you see that separation. It appears to be using a booster to make it travel extremely fast, but I did searches and was unable to find any recognized or declared hypersonic missile test, or frankly, any missile test in the area. So if we're looking at a missile test, we're looking at something that was done in secret.
Our verdict? We're going with hypersonic missile test. We think McMillan's observations are a close match to what we see in the visual evidence. But for sure, there are some lingering questions that need answering. Like, who fired it? Us or them? It's September of 2018, and residents of Southeast Asia are bracing for a megastorm, a super typhoon. Winds up to 180 miles per hour blast through the region as social media is flooded with images of the damage. One video, said to be from the Shenzhen province of China, is particularly alarming. Watch as this commercial airliner attempts to land as it fights extremely heavy crosswinds. It seems to almost tip over, then it does a complete flip. But just as it seems like it may crash, the pilot appears to regain control. The footage quickly goes viral as it triggers many people's worst fears of flying. But watch again. A number of things seem off about this footage, not least of which are the supposed typhoon conditions.
Certainly the winds are strong, but it doesn't look like there's any rain or even a ton of cloud cover.
Planes land in tough crosswinds all the time. What you're seeing here are all verified incidents.
The most dangerous part of flying a plane is takeoff and landing. That's when you're going to encounter things like crosswinds or wind shears that can really affect how you come in or how you take off. But I've never seen a passenger plane do a full barrel roll like this.
Wow. I don't know about you, but I could watch this video over and over again. It's that wild. But many people online thought it was real. So we decided to track down the original source of this footage to get the real story. The creator of this clip is Minnie Sirbis, a filmmaker in Los Angeles.
So this video was 100% CGI, a CG plane, fence, sky, everything.
But here's the thing. Minnie never claimed the video was real. That was someone else.
Somebody stole my footage. When the video went viral, it wasn't through my YouTube channel. It was through somebody else's Facebook post. And I only learned about it after it got millions of views.
So clearly, many people were duped. But still, could an airliner flip like this in real life?
Commercial planes, they're not designed to do barrel rolls and things that you might see from military jets. As the plane goes through these rolls, it appears to successfully recover off camera. That really wouldn't be consistent with what we would see in a commercial plane. You're going to lose any propulsion that you have at this point because you have a catastrophic shift in this plane that is designed not to do this.
Just to be certain, we asked physicist Hakeem Oluseyi if any kind of weather system could cause a plane to flip, like in this video.
A plane maintains its lift via the headwind, right? It's the relative speed of the plane going into the wind. And if there is a crosswind, then that will be perpendicular to the headwind. So it would act independently. So it could shift the plane side to side independently of the forward-back motion. But now there's also a twist. There's also a rotational motion, which is also independent. So that's why the ideal wind to create something like this is a fast headwind with a tornado going around it in this way.
That kind of wind would leave a trail of destruction. But look, in the video, the fence and tower are intact and undisturbed. So, our verdict? There's no question. This is a hoax. Minnie told us he still has no idea who passed off his CGI project as real or why. But you can be sure that when we see stuff like this, we'll be sure to call it out. May 4th, 2020. It's a clear night in Linwood, Washington, just north of Seattle. College student Dafa Azizan is out for an evening stroll when he looks to the stars and sees this. At first glance, it looks like a streaking comet or maybe a shooting star.
What the hell is that? It's moving.
But look closely. It's not burning up in the atmosphere, and it doesn't appear to be a single object. Instead, it's many and flying in formation.
I started to panic because it looked like a string of stars moving together. And immediately I thought this could be a spacecraft from another part of our galaxy.
If this is a fleet of alien spacecraft over the skies of Washington, it wouldn't be the first time. In fact, journalist MJ Benaya says this area is home to one of the most historic UFO sightings of all time.
In 1947, Kenneth Arnold was flying over Mount Rainier in Washington, and he reported 9 sort of like boomerang-shaped objects flying through the mountains. It was splashed across newspapers, and it's the incident that allowed journalists to coin the term flying saucer.
Although there is a possibility these are alien spaceships, Benayas also says the location of this video may provide another not-so-out-of-this-world explanation.
Washington State is home to several aircraft manufacturers, and the largest being Boeing. And Phantom Works is Boeing's top secret experimental arm of the company. Phantom Works is very much shrouded in secrecy.
Among the known programs at Phantom Works are miniature satellites constructed for the government.
Cube satellites are low power, very small mini satellites that are placed into a low Earth orbit. It could be for telecommunications work. It could be for surveillance. We don't really know. But CubeSat technology is pretty new, and they often work together as a sort of swarm or a collective. Did this gentleman record it on video? That remains to be seen.
So what do we have here? Aliens? Experimental tech from Boeing like this X-45 combat drone? If the Phantom Works program is engaged in some sort of classified technology, that could be very difficult to verify. But our experts are up to the task. Aviation expert Tim McMillan starts us off.
So could it be commercial aircraft or military aircraft, any type of fixed-wing airplane? We're looking at this perfectly straight line. Military conventional wisdom, you don't do that. I think a lot of people have seen aircraft that are in V formations or they're offset, they're spread out. These are all going straight. They're at near mid-air collision. It's not a smart way that anybody's gonna fly.
If these aren't aircraft, could they be drones? And not just any drones. One of the latest weapons in military use are loitering munitions, otherwise known as suicide or kamikaze drones. They're used to target both personnel and armor, and depending on size, can hover for a few minutes or several hours. So could this be a drone test? McMillan isn't so sure.
If there were a military testing drone swarm technology, this would not be consistent with how you would employ them. Also, classified testing is done in very secure locations. You just don't fly your secret stuff. Overpopulated areas.
So what are we seeing? Dafa Azizan's first thought was UFOs. Could he be right? We asked astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio.
The option that this is a UFO, these are always on the table. But let's consider what we're looking at here. One of the things you notice is that they're moving in unison. That means from an astronomical point of view and from an orbital mechanics point of view, that these are all objects moving in Earth orbit at the same speed and relatively same altitude.
For D'Antonio, that relative motion is key to solving this mystery. He thinks they might be a brainchild of Elon Musk, a project called Starlink. It's a global network of satellites providing internet coverage from space. Much larger than Cube satellites, Starlinks are about the size of a table and weigh about 575 pounds. The network requires thousands of satellites near enough to each other to provide simultaneous global internet coverage. They're launched 60 at a time and form a line that appears like a streak in the initial days after liftoff, which is actually a parking orbit at around 270 miles above the Earth. Then, their solar panels unfurl, and over the course of 3 to 4 months, each one spreads out to an even higher orbit of about 350 miles. Today, there are more than 2,000 in low Earth orbit.
The Starlink program is the only one that actually does this type of launch behavior that we see here. You can figure out just from a quick search which Starlink launch it was.
In fact, D'Antonio checked the Starlink launch schedule and confirmed that satellites were rocketed into orbit 12 days prior to the recording of this video.
So when people look at this, they can be forgiven for thinking that the aliens have now starting to land.
Our verdict, Starlink satellites. But while these orbiting objects don't represent an alien menace, they might be a threat nevertheless. Astronomers have raised concerns about their effect on ground-based astronomy and how the satellites will add to an already congested orbital environment.